Tell me the stuff.
I felt when I found out that you and your father were representing me, and that you said you were coming out to see me, because no lawyer ever came out to see me. And when you told me you were coming out to see me and talk to me, I felt kind of excited. I felt kind of relieved, and now I realize that the reason I was feeling like this is God working through me. This is God working, saying that now, Baba Joe, you're 27 years old in 1977. Now I'm sending this family to you, and this is going to be the family that's going to get your freedom.
But you didn't know that when you first...
No, I didn't know that. I'm just saying this was God working through me. I didn't know none of this. Yeah. I didn't know none of this at the time, but God knew it. He knew it, and the reason I was feeling excited about seeing a lawyer, after 7 years, face to face, and the first thing I said to you is that I'm innocent, man. I didn't do this.
That was Bobby Joe Leister talking about the day he met his lawyer, a meeting that would change both their lives. I'm Maura McDonough, and this is The Right Stuff, where we talk with writers in the Georgetown community about their paths to publication. Today's guest is Judge Christopher Muse, a former Massachusetts Superior Court judge who spent nearly a decade fighting to exonerate Bobby from a wrongful murder conviction. Decades later, that case became the subject of his book, Justice Under God. This is the story of how a young public defender became an accidental author.
When I left Georgetown in 1970, I had not a clue as to what I was going to be doing, and the gods of serendipity were looking over me, because the first job I got as a fill-in was school teaching, and I think I've already mentioned, I loved it. I did it for a long time. And while I was there, I took on law school, not to become a lawyer, but to give myself an option if I ever wanted to change careers. And I did that because in 1977, I had the opportunity to become a public defender. And in March of that year, 1977, I started working in Middlesex County as a public defender in the Malden District Court. This program that I had allowed me to have a private practice. And that meant that I was able to work, and make some extra money, which I desperately needed, to be frank with you. And the source of it was going to be working for my father. Now, there's three things about my father that I can say. He's a great guy, he was a great father, and he was a fabulously great trial lawyer. And he had an office in downtown Crossing. And after doing a week of public defending, I decided to knock on his door. And I went over and to speak to him, to say, listen, I want to work with you. He was reviewing his mail that day, and in it there was an appointment for him to be the lawyer for this Bobby Joe Leister for his third, and I'm underscoring 1, 2, 3, and petitions for habeas corpus. The reason I went like that is because today you're only entitled to one, but Bobby had 3 of them, and he was rejected. And Bob, my father, we called him Big Bob, looked at it and threw the paper at me. He said, here, work on this case. And I looked at it and I said, what? Huh? Me? 1 week at Malden, you want me to do a murder case? He looked at me and he said 2 things. He says, first of all, you can't do any worse than the other lawyers that have already, done the appeals. And the second thing he said, which was very important because it hadn't existed in the past, was, I want you to make sure that you go out and you meet your client face to face. Don't just rely on the record. That is the trial transcript. So I went out to see Bobby Joe about 2 weeks later. Bobby looked at me and saw a savior. I looked at him and I said, I think I'm going to screw it up. I have a brand new client. He's not going to like me. I've only got 3 weeks of work underneath me. And so the two of us were making different appraisals of each other. And the long and short of it is that I interviewed him. I knew enough about things to ask. And I came away not just because of his protestations, but because of his demeanor. This is the first time I'd been in state prison. It's the first time I saw a prisoner like this. In a week, I'd represented some young kids who were getting in trouble all over the neighborhood. And there's something very, very much about him that was compelling, that did two things. One, convinced me that he was innocent. And secondly, made me question whether or not I believe he's innocent because I'm naive and I don't know any better. And I kind of juxtaposed those two things, and I figured out, no, this guy he's just compelling. And I went back and I told my father that I think we're representing an innocent man.
The way I love your dad, man. I know he's gone and everything, but I still love him. I love him with all of my heart. When I first seen him, man, I felt like he was my second father, man. The way that he greeted me and everything, you know. He didn't just shake my hand. He gave me a hug and everything, man. And he said, Baba Joe, me and Chris, we done read your case, and other lawyers done read your case, and we're gonna do our best to get you out of here. He said, he said, I'm not, and I never forget, he said, we're not gonna stop until we win your freedom. And that really made me feel good, because I knew I didn't have no money. You know what I'm saying? And I said, damn, I ain't got no money, man. I said, back then, I think they only give a public defender $500 or $1,000, right? And they'll put the case up, and when the jury denied, that's it. They go to another case. You know what I'm saying? So when your father was telling me that, when the thing that got me when Mr. Muse was like, Baba Joe, we not going to stop until we win your freedom. He said, I guarantee you that. He said, we're not going to stop. And he did. He did. God rest his soul, he didn't. Until he won my freedom. And I tell you, man, phew.
So that was the beginning of a journey that lasted almost 10 years as a lawyer. It resulted in his exoneration. We went to the federal court, we went to the state Supreme Court twice, we went to the Superior Court, trial court 2 or 3 times. We kept getting knocked down. And one of the very perceptive things my father said in the middle of these appeals was that we were never going to get Bobby Joe his freedom based upon the appeal. The only way we were going to do it is if we found out who did the murder. So that's a big deal, right? Well, we did it. Took a long time. It's in the book. We used all sorts of devices like hypnosis and very good investigation and a lot of other things. And we identified who the true killers were. We were able to locate the weapon that was used in the original murder that was in the hands of another, I'm going to be nice to him, a gangbanger and a drug addict and a drug dealer. And we were able to not only get a new trial, but we were able to let his case that received so much favorable publicity become a brand new bellwether for wrongful convictions. And back in the day, when he got out in 1986, everyone in Boston knew the travesty of Bobby Joe's conviction and wrongful incarceration. Everyone came to love this guy because he was just one of the most gentle, nicest human beings you could possibly meet.
I think it's very clear why you did end up writing that story. It sounds like Bobby had such an impact on you, your life, but also everyone else around him. He is somebody who just his impact reached out, which I think you made very clear. And he sounds like somebody who really should have been memorialized, which I think kind of transitions into the next question of why did you feel the need to write the book about him? Do you want to get a little bit into the actual
I can
book?
do it. I wrote the book, and the very last page, can I show it to you a little bit? This is like showing. See, I was a school teacher. I'm doing show and tell. Well, it's the very last page of it. And that was his last time in 2019, in June 23rd, I had the date, when last time he spoke to the Judicial Youth Corps. And someone raised a hand and says, well, what are you going to do next, Bobby? And he looked at them and he says, well, He says, I have one more year to get my 30 years to be a city employee. I'm going to get a pension. And I'm going to go out with he says, I'm going out with my brother, Judge Muse, and we're going to talk about my case. And we're going to write a book about it. And that was kind of the moment that I said to myself, I think we have to get this done. And the reason I say get it done is because I had solicited people to write the story before, real authors. Some people showed interest, other people just understood that it was, go get me in advance, that type of stuff that authors want. And I had decided then, which is very important, I think I'm going to get it done. And what I did was I told Bobby, I want you to come over to my office. Went into a conference room. I put the microphone on. And he said, Bobby, let's start talking. And I recorded his life in Reform, Alabama, and everything that was relevant to everything before I got to know him. And as a result of it, from that one moment when I showed you in the book, the last moment, he says, me and my brother Chris are going to write a book. I said to myself, Bobby, you're not going to write a book. I'll write the book, but you can tell me about it. But he gave me his life story, and I recorded it. And I was able to save it because he died tragically in a fire in 2020 in April, I guess. So that's like 8 months after I began this interview process with him. And, I recorded 6 different sessions with him, and I went out and I recorded sessions with his other friends and neighbors and relatives and co-workers. But it wouldn't have happened but for that moment. There's another serendipity God up there, right? When he said to the kid, raised his hand, Mr. Lisa, what are you going to do? And he says, well, I'm going to write a book with Muse. That impelled me to do it. I was lazy about it. I should have done it before, but I ended up doing it. And I did it for the reasons you just said, Maura. His life was too beautiful and too important to have just been, just dropped off the planet when he died. It was just too important.
Well, I think it's a very interesting start because this book, Justice Under God, kind of gave you the writing bug, right? Because now I know you're working on some fiction novels based in the different areas throughout Massachusetts. If you want to talk about it a little bit, your fiction work, your composite character.
It's about a murder that took place not too far from me on Cape Cod, and I call it Murder on Brewster Flats, and it's about a guy that was murdered that was a businessman. And then another one I have, without getting into too many details, is about a murder that happens in Cambridge, and it's by 2 people that learned to hate each other in Northern Ireland. And they were both from Derry and Londonderry, the 2 names for the same town. And here's the thing, it's fun to do. It's filling up part of my day. I enjoy it, and I feel comfortable because I know, the most important thing for a writer is to know what you're writing about, to know the subject. You can't pretend it. And I know the subject, to be honest with you. I do know the subject. I know it implicitly. And it's just a good exercise for me. I'm not going to make a lot of money from it, but I like it.
I realize you telling it kind of back to back the different story arcs. It just sounds like there's a lot of murders in Massachusetts. But
no, these are good ones.
I know,
First
it's
of
a
all, they're
job.
all fictional. Mine are fictional, so they're not on the tally. And by the way, you're in Washington D.C. Washington D.C. does not have a favorable comparison to Boston. Just to let you know.
Oh, I know. I was on a jury for a murder trial in Georgetown earlier this year.
Was there a conviction?
Yeah, he did it on camera.
Yeah. Well, that's always that's what's happening.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this before our talk because I was thinking, because I used to want to be a lawyer just like you, and then for a long time. And when I was younger, I used to kind of frame it along the lines with writing, because I think with my dad being a lawyer, I understood that it's not black and white. There's not one objective truth that happened. It's everyone's different version of some sort of events. And what you're sort of doing as a trial lawyer is taking this the different set of facts to sort of portray the certain narrative for your client, right? And you're kind of doing a
Yeah.
similar thing with writing almost, and especially with writing something that's so true to life, like you are, Judge Chris, like how you are sort of taking this composite of real stories and then moving them together to make a narrative.
Yeah, you're right on all those points. One of the things that I found, just to kind of responsive to some of the questions we had earlier off camera, was, I learned how to write with the nuns telling me how to decline sentences. I had Georgetown. I found I had a professor, Paul Betts at Georgetown, that I actually have all of the things I had to write, and I went from a 60 to a 78 with a big, "Are you joking?" He would say things like improvement, which I thought was great. And my point is that over a long period of time, I figured out that not only the stuff that I was taught, but also what I did as a trial lawyer. And as a trial lawyer, I teach trial practice. And for 20 years, I told my students that a trial lawyer is a storyteller, and that you have to be able to create your own narrative and speak to the jury in plain English and make it interesting. Make them enjoy your discussion. And that's, I think, above and beyond anything else that I learned or experienced in terms of being able to write now, or be a writer, quote unquote, to be a writer. I have a hard time saying it. It's kind of like the imposter syndrome, right? But I have a hard time saying it, but it's because that's what we did. Lawyers that try cases are storytellers. And that's what I tried to do with my books.
Perfect. I think this is a good point to move on to our lightning round. So this is when we just kind of throw some questions at you quickly, and then you can answer them in about a minute or so.
Oh,
The
good.
first,
You're gonna
the
kill
first,
me. I know you're gonna kill me. This is not
I
gonna
know
work. This is not gonna be pretty.
we need a better name for it. It sounds so like ominous and threatening.
Yeah.
The first question is, what is one book that influenced your approach to writing?
The memoirs, Hemingway, and the one that I liked the best was A Movable Feast, for a lot of reasons. I like the writing about it. I like the fact that he was able to write and have people read about it millions of times. And it was just about him wandering around Paris, drinking and talking to different people, and sometimes leaving to go skiing and coming back. But it was a first-person narrative, which meant that he was telling his story, and he was telling about his life that he knew, and it was an interesting one, even though it was compressed in post World War One Paris, in the 1920s. But it was his writing in the storytelling part of it that more than anything else. And of course, that's the kind of writing I like to look at when I'm doing my nonfictions. I love the Meachams of the world, and David McCullough and Doris Kearns Goodwin, who are able to take history and turn it into wonderful stories. And I love some of the mysteries. I like the Patterson books, and in Boston we had a guy that wrote Robert Parker wrote Spencer for Hire. I like that one because it's all about Boston, etc. And so my point is that those first person clear stories were the ones that grabbed my attention more than anyone else, and I thought that those were the ones that were most helpful in me being able to tell my story.
And what's interesting is we did another one of these with another Boston-based writer, Jessica Balboni. And when we asked her this question, she also mentioned Doris Kearns Goodwin as one of the authors, so that just stuck with me. Next question is, what's one piece of advice you would give for someone starting out?
It's the one that I thought about. Don't be afraid of it. And also, if you're writing a book, write it for yourself. Write it for your family. Write it for a few of your friends. And feel confident that they will enjoy the story that you're taking the time to tell them. And then let the rest of the audience kind of develop around it. So I would say that anyone who wants to be writing can write and should write. It's as simple as that. And what your audience is unimportant. It's not getting into the first stacks of a Barnes and Noble at Christmas time. That'd be beautiful to do it. Most people don't get it that way, but don't be afraid of it. And almost everyone has a story to tell.
Yeah, I mean, there's a phrase, it's kind of corny, but like I'm also corny. It's like, make it exist, then make it good. Like just do it, and then you
Yeah.
can always revise, edit, but just start. Yeah.
Well, you mean in terms of writing? I agree with you. I mean, you don't, the average, unless you're a professional writer, then you're not going to have a thing called writer's block because they're on a deadline. When you're doing it for yourself, you're not on someone else's deadline. You're not under someone else's pressure. You're doing it for yourself. And what you do with it later on is secondary. And so if you think of it in those terms, you might eliminate some of the pressure. I suppose if you had an advance of $200,000 and a publisher that's yelling at you all the time, it might not be the same kind of approach that I just gave you. But for the average person that wants to write, don't be afraid.
So for the final question, we wanted to ask, how has Georgetown shaped your path as a writer?
As a writer, I mean, you mean like Professor Betts, who gave me the instruction? That's one thing I got that was important. I think the liberal arts education. I think the liberal arts education is undervalued today. I think that Georgetown was a place where they could grab 18-year-olds and let them mix up things for 2 or 3, 4 years to kind of find themselves without any pressure. Today's students, I know today's students. I'm teaching law students. I still interview at Georgetown, by the way. So I know who all the students are right now that are 17, 18, that are taking all the advanced placement courses. They want to get into Georgetown and later on rule the world, which is great. We didn't have that kind of pressure. So Georgetown was a place where you could really grow. Georgetown was a place where you could really just stop and listen. Georgetown was a place, Georgetown was a place where I made a lot of great friends, and everything else was a bonus. So, and it's being with those people and the experiences, going to Europe, being able to live in a different town like Georgetown. I was a very important person for the United States government at the time, for the Congress, because I worked in the Congress. I was an elevator operator. And so, I used to fancy myself as the most important. I used to tell people that I moved the men that moved the government. And to have the experience in Georgetown of, during 1967, 68, 69, to be in Washington at that time, to be down in the Congress at that time, it was unbelievable. And that was a Georgetown experience. They didn't give me the job, but it was was my life at Georgetown. I walked in at the aftermath of Bobby Kennedy giving his announcement to run for the president. He did in the Senate caucus room. And I was working that day, and I just happened to walk through, no security, just him, TV cameras, a bunch of senators, his family saying I'm going to run for president, and I walked in the aftermath of it. When I was at Georgetown, I was in the middle of the Martin Luther King Jr. assassination riots, and I stayed around when everyone else evacuated the city because I went down to work. But my point is, I was seeing all those things. That's Georgetown. That's Georgetown for me. Going to Europe was the biggest thing for me. Getting away from home and learning how to, live, with great friends for the rest of your life. That's the Georgetown experience. All of which contributes to the experiences that you call upon when you're taking pen to paper to write about something. It's inseparable.
Again, Justice Under God, as you mentioned, available on Amazon, and then your upcoming books, we'll have to have you come back on once they're published and ready for the public. So
I'm gonna get I'm gonna get my Cape Cod book published soon enough for people to read on the beach. How's that sound?
I love that. I love that
We'll do
timeline.
it.